Welcome. This is David Bowles, Human Meme. Today's topic, Soybean Revolution. Well, this year, after 125 years, the largest dairy farm in California is changing its plan for animal agriculture. It seems people just aren't drinking as much cow mucus anymore. That California family farm is not going out of business. No, they're giving in to a revolution. That California dairy farm recently sold 2,000 head of cattle and are now growing trees instead of milking mother cows. And they are now harvesting agricultural diamonds, almonds, and their harvest is now almonds for almond milk. Ah, yes, the world is slowly changing to a plant-based diet. And that is really good for your heart, great for the climate, wonderful for the economy, and simply exquisite for your mortal soul. And this change isn't new. Life is about change. You can't always expect to do the same thing, one thing, for your entire life. Today, life is about contortion, and then going with the flow, and then seeing the boulder rolling down the hill directly at you, and then stepping aside just a little bit to avoid getting run over downriver. Of course, a lot of traditional animal agricultural family farms are not happy with this new kick into plant-based diets. Dairy farms and cattle pens, and the hog house, and the chicken shed, well, they all want the status quo. They want continuation of what was. They want what we have to never change, only so they will know where their money will come from. And some farms want the government handout. They need the federal guarantee of profits. They want the Farm Bureau to help them meet the needs of their dying bottom lines. And who can blame them for wanting the easy money of the status quo and of the has always been? Change is hard. Families are at risk. Riches are at stake. Bet wrong, and you and your entire family are bankrupt after one bad harvest and a single early frost. Yes, changing your farm is hard. Animal agriculture is a down and dirty business centered on death and on the separation of mother from child. But if you want to survive today and thrive tomorrow on that same family farm, you need to run ahead of the boulder and try to catch up behind it. Because once you're behind the rock, you've been left behind forever. Left for dead. And all the right action is heading in front of the rolling boulder, where you have to remain nimble and quick to survive in a dying society. And before there was a nut revolt, an almond nut revolt, there was a revolution. A soybean revolution. 40 years or so ago, when I was but a wee lad wandering around in the lower Midwestern Loop Valley while visiting my grandfather, The area was surrounded by crops and the smell of livestock and row upon row of bending stalks of corn that arced not towards mercy or justice or the horizon, but it arced toward the almighty dollar. And all of that husked corn was harvested and waving hello as you sped past the harvest in your car on the way to St. Laborie and Ord. And I quite remember, as that young child, overhearing some of the panic of a big change in the economy of thought among the farmers in Ord and North Loop and Scotia, and all the acreages in between, and the uproar back then, 40 years ago, was over the same sort of thing today that gripped the California dairy farm to close down their cows and open up their trees. The farm economy back then was changing in Nebraska, and many farmers were making big changes to bring in more money to their family farms. And the change was this back then: instead of growing acres and acres of alfalfa, and alfalfa is used to feed horses, dairy cows, beef cattle, turkey, sheep, chicken, other animals on the farm. Alfalfa has a lot of nutritional value in a small amount. Alfalfa is an efficient feed. And alfalfa is the best horse feed around for the dollar to the faithful. So anyway, these alfalfa farmers were taking big steps to move away from alfalfa, because growing feed for animals didn't pay much. And some farmers back then were keen enough to see a trend ahead of the boulder, away from consuming farm animals for profit. And so those alfalfa farmers, many of them at least, decided instead to start planting and harvesting a crop that was starting to go into high demand locally and internationally. Soybeans. Yes, soybeans. 40 years ago, it was a revolution in agriculture. There was a large international want for the soybean. And even here in America in the 1970s, there was a rising interest in soy milks and tofu and edamame and the like. And because so few farms were planting and harvesting soybeans back then, you could get a higher dollar amount for a soybean than you could for an alfalfa sprout. Easy money, right? And among the old-timers, among the traditional family factory farms in the Midwest, well, there was a certain amount of outrage over the change in the economy and in the philosophy of some of their neighbors of keeping the current food chain alive and moving. And so, with fewer farmers planting alfalfa, the price for cattle feed, alfalfa, would rise, and also with the rise of the soybean, more of those forward-thinking farmers would be getting paid more money for the same amount of work. So, more farmers giving up alfalfa meant higher prices for the alfalfa farmers who stayed with alfalfa. And also more money for the new soybean farmers who were exploiting a whole new niche in agriculture. And those who lost, those who were left behind the boulder, were, maybe still are, the animal agriculturalists who want to feed their dairy cows at a lower cost, while still worrying about this soy milk and almond milk and tofu cutting into their bottom lines. It's all economics, yeah. And so, this change from farming animal feed to producing feed for human consumption. Farm animals don't really eat soybeans, but soybeans are found in a high percentage of many fish foods. And so this human soybean revolution was disruptive. But Wright and many other farmers who were formerly and solidly in the chain inside the circle of farming death, not life, had a decision to make. Do they stay the course and try to reform the circle? Or do they too jump and make a forward change ahead of the boulder that is good for the people, the environment, and maybe, just maybe, the animals? Or do those farmers just stay behind the rolling rock, stay in the slaughterhouse, and stand in the stalls, and litter in the cages of cruelty? Well, we have one answer. We have one example of a family farm in California. And that farm decided, sometime over the last stretch of these 40 years, out of a total of 125 years in business, they now decided to step forward and make the change from the dairy cow to the almond nut. And we become to know that it is never too late to change, never too late to be left behind, never too late to do the right thing in the name of profit or in the spirit of humanity, and gamble everything you know and have loved, or claimed to have loved, on a new path forward, where the family farm profits from goodness from now on, leaving behind cruelty and hardship. Yes, leaving it all behind in the dust bowl of what was and what never should have been. Thank you for listening. Be a human meme.